ready to continue to our next speaker, Mr. Pekka Puustinen, and he is Director General of the Department for Development Policy, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Finland. And your title is How can the Ministry of Foreign Affairs promote cross-sectoral cooperation in Finnish development aid? And it's really to thank you that we are today discussing about the issue. And so let's hear what are your expectations, how we can deliver this and how we could deliver the kind of cooperation even better in the future. So welcome.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning to everybody. And when looking through the window, it's good to remember the news I just got 2 minutes ago that the most happiest countries in Europe have been listed once again. And the top position goes to Denmark, and the position number 4 goes to Finland. So, and the 2 countries in between are Iceland and Norway. So it's good to remember that when you are looking through the window. I want to thank the previous speakers, the absent President Halonen and Birgit for your candid and inspiring words. I think that we can talk the things plain here. And I also thank you very much for the opportunity to come to this seminar and share some ideas of the quite demanding topic we have on the agenda for myself. I'm also happy to welcome our Nepalese delegates here. I just had a talk with you before the start of the seminar that Nepal has actually a specific part in my heart. I joined the ministry for the first time in 1989, and one of my first tasks was to be the program officer for Finnish-Nepalese development cooperation. And actually my last trip to Nepal was early this year. So in a way there is a special relationship there between our 2 countries. And I also want to convey the best regards of my relatively new development minister, Mr. Pekka Puustinen, to this crowd. As most of you know, we had a change, a little bit unexpected change of Minister for International Development last month. But now we have Pekka Puustinen once again steering us, and actually he was my minister for the same position in 1995. So in a way, good things come back. No problem with that. And before I go more in depth to the title, I would like to also recognize the good cooperation we have with Väestöliitto, the Finnish Family Weather Federation, WWF. You are our long-term trusted partners, as well as UNFPA. And actually, perhaps a good example of a cross-sectoral cooperation, if I may, is our recent decision actually made by my previous development minister at the United Nations General Assembly Ministerial Week that Finland is channeling some funding what we receive from the European emission trade system to UNFPA, to UNICEF, to UN Women, and also to UNDP, the less amount. And that only shows that whatever benefit we get from the environmental or climate change side, we can channel some of the benefits towards other sectors. And actually the main reason we were doing that is, of course, that we are happy with the cooperation with the UNFPA, but also to tackle the issue which was mentioned both by Madam President and by Ann Birgit, is that we have to look at the post-2015 agenda, which I'm not tackling too much today, but we have to concentrate also on the next 2 years before the post-2015 begins, because we have many gaps to fill. And even as aggregate, we can be quite happy with some of the results, reduction of poverty, access to clean water and some other issues, maternity health perhaps to a certain extent. When we are looking at the reality at country base or even regional base, then the picture is slightly different. And we are afraid, for example, that countries which are under stress, which are under conflict or in a post-conflict situation, it may well be that none of the countries reaches any of the MDGs, and that's really a reason for serious thinking. But let me then go more into the topic of today, which is very inspiring, and I hope that the Foreign Ministry is not the only driving force behind this gathering and seminar, because it can be challenging actually. And let me start by arguing that actually the Ministry for Foreign Affairs of Finland is one engine or for cross-sectoral cooperation. And unlike many development cooperation organizations, the Finnish Foreign Ministry is in charge of the whole thing. So we don't have a agency called FINIDA, even though the logo might be there, but it's really part and parcel of the Foreign Ministry. And actually it's been scattered around the ministry so that most of our departments are involved in development cooperation, not just mine. We are covering certain things, NGO support, the UN side, the development side, development banks, and the like, and the overall policy and overall coordination and overall responsibility for development funding. But all our regional departments, which are in charge of Asia, Americas, Africa, Middle East, Eastern Europe, you name them, they all practice development cooperation with the appropriations my department is channeling through those departments. And one of the nice things is really that unlike some development cooperation operations and departments in other countries, we really have a country focus if we want to. And I would like to just give two examples here. One is the, how would I say, the opening of Myanmar or Burma, which name you like better. The country was so closed for so many years that the very few partners the country had very narrow cooperation, but the rest of the world didn't really have an access to the country. Now with the sudden opening of Myanmar, Burma, I'm afraid to say all donors, all grown governments are rushing into the country, and that's something which seems to happen and we cannot avoid it. But the other thing is that, for example, in the case of Finland, we try to have a holistic view on which kind of cooperation we should practice with Burma, with the government, with local authorities, with NGOs, with civil society, so that we can combine both development cooperation resources, our policies on human rights, peace mediation or mediation, trade links, and also the normal traditional security policy issues. So we really try to make kind of a package of cooperation with these kind of countries. The next country, which is maybe not really a country in line, is perhaps Somalia, which used to be our partner country until the late 80s, 1980s. Once again, Foreign Ministry is in a position to have a holistic view, a comprehensive view on the relations with those countries. And for the time being, it seems that this kind of a organization we have actually has its pros and cons, but this is surely something which is profitable for all of us. Then another thing is that we used to speak about development cooperation, and that's many times, even my new minister, I think he sometimes calls him a Minister for Development Cooperation, but actually it's broader than that. We are talking about development policy and development cooperation. Some might say that, okay, is there any change? Is it just the language? But actually the development policy means more than development cooperation in our view. The development cooperation for us is much more the bilateral, so to speak, traditional way of doing things. And development policy is the set of all policies, all actions outside of development cooperation in other fields, in other sectors, in other ministries, which may have an influence on developing country situations. And it's very close to policy coherence or policy coherence for development. And that's one of the things that we as a foreign ministry would like to see more, and I guess we are one of the key players, so it depends also very much on us how we can work on that issue. The other thing before I go to the sectoral level is really that we can also achieve a lot across sectors when we look at the Finnish development cooperation at the widest possible angle, which means that whatever the World Bank or the other multilateral development banks are doing, it's also a Finnish cooperation. We are contributing to that. Whatever European Union is doing or the European Commission is doing, it's also part of the Finnish development cooperation. And not to mention the cooperation we are practicing with the UN specialized agencies. We should argue that that's part of our cooperation at the same time when those bodies are independent and we are doing a great job. Because sometimes we lose a little bit the track and sight when we go and have what we call country consultations, for example with the government of Nepal or with government of some other countries, that we concentrate almost solely on the bilateral side of the things, which anyway, if you take the overall Finnish development aid budget, the bilateral side, not including the NGO support, is roughly 1/3 of the whole aid budget. So, and actually it's even less when we just look at the 7 long-term partner countries we have. So we should not lose the sight in the sense that we are contributing through so many channels towards the cooperation with a given country, sometimes with a given sub-region, or with a given organization. And at all these levels, we can look at the issue of cross-sectoral issues, which can be a tough nut, and I'm going to that point quite soon. The other thing, which is also in a way nice, I would say, within the foreign ministry, is that even I sometimes have a feel that I'm on the demanding side when I'm representing the development perspective to the overall policy, overall foreign policy we have. But actually it works two ways. So for example, when we are negotiating trade agreements with developing countries, or actually the European Commission is doing that, but we are looking at the issue, we try to do our job on pointing to the points which might be crucial for developing countries, and especially for the poorest developing countries. The same applies maybe for human rights issues, that whenever we are having talks or consultations with given countries, we try to, in a way, add in a certain perspective which might otherwise not be there. And the other way around, because even sometimes I'm internally at the ministry, I feel that I'm more on the demanding side, but sometimes it works the vice versa. For example, that we have a specific interest for mediation, peace mediation, which can be funded either from development cooperation funds when it's ODA eligible, or from other funding we have at our disposal. Other departments come to us to ask that, and quite rightly explaining that if we are going really to help a country which is, let's say, in a very fragile situation for the time being, it may be not the best thing just in a way to start up the normal bilateral development cooperation, because maybe the prerequisites are not yet there. But what we should do is first to help with mediation and get forward step by step. And then we look at the issue, sometimes saying that you are quite right, we shouldn't be rushing, we should first start with this kind of cooperation and then go further to other fields. So within the foreign ministry, it's many faceted, and it seems to be working. I've been, as we rotate within the ministry, so I've been sitting at all sides of the desk, so to speak. So in a way, it seems to be working. Then another issue regarding the cross-cutting objectives, which are not exactly the cross-sectoral things, but I would like to once again mention that we have 3 cross-cutting issues which my government has published in the white paper for development policy for this government, and which are very relevant, for example, to the cooperation we will be discussing today here. And the first one is the gender equality, which has been there for a long time. I guess all Nordic countries have had that since the very beginning, I would say. But maybe we have a special emphasis on the issue now, much more emphasis than maybe during the previous 2 or 3 governments. The other thing is reduction of inequalities, and that's the topic that we could talk about the whole day, actually, because inequalities in all countries are increasing within the countries, between the countries, and for example, when we are preparing for the post-2015 world, I think that will be one of the toughest nuts to crack, because it includes all of us, including this beautiful country of Finland. The third point as a cross-cutting issue is climate sustainability or climate proofing. And it's actually a new thing, because these 2 other things have been there in one form or another also during the previous governments, but the climate sustainability or proofing is something new, and I will go a little bit deeper on that issue soon, but it's something new, something difficult to materialize perhaps. Also, when we are talking about cross-sectoral issues, I would like to emphasize the entry point or departure point of my government's development policy, which is that all development should be human rights based, and that the human rights based approach is what we are applying now. For example, the previous government had slightly different emphasis on that issue, but now we are in a way swearing in the name of the human rights based approach, which fits very nicely the Finnish development cooperation and Finnish foreign policy. But once again, when we go to the project level, program level, country level, and we take this thing up with our partners, partner governments, for example, it's not the easiest thing to tackle. And actually, there was a very good example by Ann Birgit on that issue, on the extent to how profound the division can become if you are not careful enough. But this human rights-based approach actually can also be interpreted in very, very practical terms when we are, for example, thinking about things like people's right or people's rights to access to basic services, social services, access to justice, maybe to land ownership. Very simple things which are much less, how would I say, far-fledging when you take them to the country level. And these issues are something which surely are present in Väestöliitto's and WWF's cooperation with Nepalese partners as well. Then there is one thing, maybe kind of a controversial thing, but I'm taking it up also on request of some of my colleagues who are in the department, and it's about the thing that Finland is very dedicated to so-called results-based management, and the issue of looking at the results, effectiveness and efficiency of our cooperation, much more maybe than in the past or 15, 20 years ago. Everybody can agree on that issue because it's one of the cornerstones of an effective development cooperation. But at the same time, we are slightly worried within the foreign administration that whether we are also facing the tendency of narrowing our views too much by sectors, so that we look at one sector or we look at another sector, and we are recruiting and we are asking for people who are masters of one trade only, so to speak, but not many trades, because it's not that much appreciated. And we can have at least two opinions on this issue, but the thing is that the best possible solution should be that experts are experts in their given field, and they are experts beyond the sector boundaries. That's the best possible solution. And actually I have some good colleagues, some of my senior advisors on different sectors in the crowd, and I'm happy to notice that with you guys, for example, the thing is really that you can look beyond the sector boundaries, and there are some colleagues who quite recently retired, and they also had this gift of, for example, looking at the agricultural sector or forestry, and at the same time maybe being one of the top advisors on gender issues, equality issues, access issues, and not just the given hard sector, so to speak. And this goes very much to the heart of the question of cross-sectoral thinking, I think. But and in one way, this kind of a generalism is not directly linked to the results-based management. There can be some dichotomy there, that whether we just look at one given issue at one time, or we should have a broader view on the issue. And I have the feeling that, for example, many civil society organizations have the gift of having kind of a comprehensive view. The scale of the program may be small, but usually it's looked at a very comprehensive manner, and that's good. That's good news. Then I go to some of the, sorry, I broke my reading glasses, so I go to one or two examples of the, let's say, sectoral issues. And first, we had some internal brainstorming at the ministry on the issue of health and social development, and it seemed from the outset that actually, as a ministry, we don't have too much experience in that field, or we don't have too many good or other examples that how can we combine these things in our programs if it's not kind of a sector-wide support or even direct budget support, where things, in theory at least, meet each other. But it seemed that in that specific setup, we don't have that much experience we could, in a way was on here. And one of the reasons is also that some of my examples, they come from my previous position when I was in charge of our cooperation in Asia and in Latin America. They tend to come from those countries. Now, one of the things which is a problem surely for national administrations here in Finland and elsewhere, but also in developing countries and development context, is that we are talking a lot about breaking silos. The silo word is basically everywhere, and it's very good because it doesn't refer now to missiles or anything. So breaking silos is good, but actually in also in many of our partner countries, the silos between the administrations and ministries are very deeply dug. They are really kind of trenches and very hard to overcome. And for example, I just cite a example from Lao PDR, where we are still having a good cooperation on improving local people's livelihood and revenue from forest and forestries and community forestry. And the problem was not our approach, the problem was not the approach of the local communities, but the challenge was that we had at least 3 or maybe 4 different ministries, and each of them had a stake in the program. Maybe the Minister of Trade was in charge of the price of the wood to be cut. The other ministry was in charge of how the money should be channeled to the local community. Maybe Ministry of Agriculture had something to say on the land use or lease or anything. And it took years and years and years to bring these parties together. But I'm citing this example because finally we succeeded with our Lao partners. We succeeded in changing legislation, and now the thing works. But it took years, and the main problem was that everything was fine, but one of the ministries didn't allow the local community to get enough revenue from the wood they would sell. So why should they sell anything if it's not profitable to them? The money went to other parts. So in practical terms, we are sometimes getting breakthroughs in cross-sectoral approaches. And that project had a happy end, so I'm happy to cite that there. The other thing I would like to raise here, and maybe some of my colleagues can later add on, is that it seems that water as a substance is one of the most cross-cutting issues in any development cooperation, and here I'm maybe mostly citing our examples with good cooperation with Nepal. Because water is so essential for human activities, personal lives of people, and whatever we are doing there with water resources is always an exercise of thinking beyond sectoral boundaries. And one good example, for example, was during my previous government, that we still have a good cooperation with Western Nepal in watershed management, and we were doing good cooperation with Nepalese partners, but there was something missing, and then my government decided that why don't we add on the issue of hygiene in this water resources management thing, because it's not really there in the way it should be. And actually, for example, when I'm looking at this nice picture here, which is good and shows a good result, I was thinking that whether the boy has washed his hands before or not, drinking the water. This is the trick. So we have to have comprehensive look on many issues, and the use and safe use of water resources for personal hygiene or as drinking water is one of the things. Once again, water is also a very scarce raw material, so to speak, and in many cases, in many areas where actually Finland is not that active, but also with our partner countries, water is such a valuable raw material that it has to be decided not by us, but by local communities and ministries, that how big a portion of the water resources should be used for household purposes, how much for livelihoods, what about agro-industries, what about neighboring regions, neighboring countries, all these things should be tackled at the same time and not just look one thing, that now we resolve the problem of having this thing in pack and parcel, and then we take the next problem. Those are simple, visibly simple things, but actually sometimes very complicated to be accomplished in real life. And also, I guess we used to have more in the Finnish development cooperation programs which we called integrated rural development programs or anything. And those were truly integrated in the sense that, for example, we agreed with, I also once again cite examples with Nepal, that we agreed with the Nepalese local and government authorities on a development plan for a given area. It could be a watershed management area or something the like. And the approach was very cross-sectoral, so it included basically many things that the ordinary citizens and ordinary dwellers, village dwellers would face every day, whether it's about schooling or access to social services, health care, livelihood development. The challenge has been a little bit that maybe sometimes the scope was too generous, too general and wide, so that we tried to tackle every single issue of everyday life. And as we know that whenever we tackle our everyday life issues, it's really a number of complex things. So maybe the good way should be somewhere in between the whole of comprehensive approach and one single thing approach. But my feeling is that maybe my colleagues can later add on here that it seems that we have a little bit less of that thinking now than we used to have maybe 15 years ago or 20 years ago when I had my first experience with Nepalese cooperation. And my last thing, just looking at the, looks good. Okay, so the last thing as an example of the cross-sectoral cooperation is of course the climate action work or climate change, what we are facing at. There, I guess that one of the best results on cross-sectoral approach can be drawn from the work we are doing in the context of fighting climate change, mitigating or adapting to that. And some of the good examples which can be found in almost in all our partner countries come from the, well, they come from the forestry sector, but in the sense that we have been able to help local communities, for example, to maintain or even increase forest coverage, but at the same time in the way that the forestry can, in a way, produce some part of the livelihood for the local people. So at the same time we are able to diminish the risk of erosion, and we are also able to adapt the local circumstances to climate change, but we are also generating, for example, income for the local people, and maybe and with the income, maybe some of that income will be invested in better schooling, education, or health care, or whatever. So they can be, in a way, virtual circles as well. Maybe the challenge here is that sometimes the successes are taking place, at least geographically, in very small areas, that things run smoothly in an area, but actually the rest of the bigger area is still lacking that, and that's always a matter of scarce resources, of course. And then the final point actually here, and now I come back to this good cooperation between the Nepalese partners, WWF and Väestöliitto, on this project which is called Population Health and Environment. And it seems that you are doing some groundbreaking work there, showing that, or actually tackling very different issues as the population growth and its impact on environment at the same time. And I would propose, and the Foreign Ministry is at your disposal in this issue, that once you gather more results and more experience, sometimes they are good results, sometimes they are success stories, sometimes they are stories about how not to proceed. It's also very valuable. That when this kind of material is at hand, and I guess that you have practiced the cooperation quite some time, so maybe the material is there, that the Foreign Ministry is also at your disposal to help bringing those experience also to international financial development institutions and to a larger circles, that we can have this kind of cross-sectoral approaches and what we have learned from that. Also, we are ready to do that within the European Union cooperation, because that's maybe the closest thing we have, not to speak about the Nordic cooperation for sure. But good stories, whether about the successes or about the things which should be done in another way, they are valuable, and I just encourage you in this triangle or four-partite cooperation to look at those issues. You can also approach our embassy in Kathmandu in having these kind of discussions, really. And I would like to end by what most of the speakers started, so just reflecting very shortly on the post-2015 thing, and I think that we need new ideas, we need innovative ideas, which is one of the things you are actually working on now. If we are going to tackle the post-2015 development agenda, which will be a very broad agenda, including the sustainable development side. And my feeling is that, for example, when we are looking at the World Bank and the new president, the World Bank has set a very ambitious goal, one of the two goals of eradicating poverty by 2013. And now they have set a kind of a benchmark that the ratio of extreme poverty should be at 9% by 2020, which is very, very soon. I share his views that if we are going to achieve that, we have to change the way we are doing this business. So any new ideas, any good ideas, small scale, large scale, are most welcome to us, and we are ready to share those ideas with others. So thank you very much for your attention.